All right, I will say good morning, a good tavach. Hopefully everyone had a beautiful, uplifting, and inspiring Shabbos. It is a great zechus, Baruch Hashem, to begin another week of Bava Kama together. Sadly, but also excitingly, it's our last week of Bava Kama. Sadly, because it's been such an incredible Masechta, and our trusted friend over 100 days, Baruch Hashem, but also excitingly, because in Meir Hashem, when Bava Kama ends, new doors open in Meir Hashem. So we're going to make the most of being with our beloved friend, our best friend, Bava Kama, Meir Hashem, for the remaining days that we have him by our side. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share, to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Mrs. Selma Woolf, for dedicating all the Shiurim and drushos this month, with immense gratitude for the refuos from Hashem and the merit of our refuah for all of those in need, and the zchus of our brave soldiers and the return of our hostages. The Schwarzbaum Family, in memory of Rabbi Aharon Schwarzbaum, Aharon Yosef ben Meir, zechus, and the Lavine and Behrman families, in memory of Bill Ziv, Zev Shmuel ben Yisroel. We dedicate all of Maseches, Bava Kama, Li'ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Harush, Hashem Yikom Damo. We dedicate our learning, Li'ilui Nishmas, the soldiers who have fallen in battle, Major Ayal Shumenov, Sergeant Neria Baliti, and Staff Sergeant Ido Eli Zrian. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the Neshama will have an aliyah, and the families a Neshama. And we thank our Daf Yomi pastry sponsor for today, which is beautiful Eric Schaefer. I remember Eric Schaefer. He used to live in town, Baruch Hashem, from Texas, right? From Texas now. So Eric Schaefer, in honor of his mother, Rus Bas Avram, who imbues her children and grandchildren with Yira Shamayim, Avas Hashem, and teaches them Gemilos, Chasodim, and Lashon Hatov. Lashon Hatov. I got nervous when I read that last part. I read it too quickly. I thought it was like, Lashon Hara? I was like, no, Lashon Hatov, Baruch Hashem. All right, it's incredible. Amirat Hashem, Rus Bas Avram, should be gebenched with many more years of bracha, mazel, simcha, me'ev, esim, shanim, tovos. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, but the good news is tomorrow's daf is shorter, so we're gonna equal out. And then the next day is a monstrosity, and then all right, whatever. We'll Amirat Hashem. One way or another, we always finish the Masechta. One way or another. All right, so today's daf is Kuf Tes Vav 115. We are picking up at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Yud Daled on the base 114b. Mishnah says as follows: Hamakir Kelav Usvarav Biyadacher. So we'll say a very interesting case here. A person, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain recognizes literally again his utensils or his books in the hands of another. So in other words, Ruvain sees his stuff in Shimon's hands. So I will say, so now, and then one more piece. And I will say now, accompanying this, there was a shame. There was not a rumor, but again, there was news in the community that Ruvain had experienced the theft. So there's two things happening over here. Number one, people are talking about the fact that Ruvain had a burglary, right? That's number one. And number two, Ruvain sees his stuff in Shimon's possession. Now, both say, now what's interesting about this is, Ruvain is not accusing Shimon of being the thief. That's not what's happening over here. But what is happening over here is, what we're assuming happened over here, is that someone stole property from Ruvain and what? Sold it. And Shimon unwittingly purchased stolen property. So we'll say, so now what do you do? This is a very interesting case, because here, what you have is a victim, Ruvain, but then you also have Shimon, who really didn't do anything wrong, right? Shimon bought stuff, not knowing that it was stolen property. So what do you do in such a case like this? Yishavalo lokeach kamo nasan v'yitol. So we'll say, what happens in this case is, so Shimon, the purchaser, swears that he bought this property not knowing that it was stolen. He swears how much he bought it for, and Ruvain has to pay him back. We'll say, we're going to see, this is going to be something that is called Takanas HaShuk. Takanas HaShuk essentially says that we have to protect purchasers. When a person purchases property and he has no reason to know, we'll say, you go ahead and you decide, you want to buy one of those monstrosity flat screen televisions, right? For the purpose of watching Shiurim, right? Because what else are you going to do with it, right? And let's say, and it goes ahead and I don't know, what do these things normally cost? Right, $1,000? Yeah. Oh, everyone, monstrosity. How much is the monstrosity? How much? 2,000? None of us. I know. No one's thinking. This is a trick question. I want to see who really rattles this song. Oh, it's $2,499. You know, right? So let's say, right, and you find the guy who sells it to you for $250. So obviously, right, something's up. So we're not talking about that kind of case. We're talking about a situation where, again, Shimon bought the object, had no reason to think that it was a stolen object. So as such, there has to be some level of buyer protection that Chazal created as well. So interestingly enough, in this case over here, what's going to happen is Shimon's going to swear, I went ahead and I bought this object for X amount of money. Ruvain is going to pay. Now, Ruvain is the owner of the object. So Ruvain, the owner of the object, is paying Shimon in order to get his object back. He's buying it back. He's essentially buying it back. I will say now, if not what? If there wasn't a shmua shel gezel, in other words, if no one was talking about the fact that Reuben was a victim of a burglary, so lav kolimenu. So then ultimately in that case, Reuben is not believed to make his claim. Shani Omer machron la'achar v'lachon zehemenu. So I'll say, if there's no call that there was a burglary, that there was a robbery, so then Reuben is not believed to say that the object was stolen from me. Why? Because we just assume what happened over here. Reuben stole it. Reuben sold it, and what? He has seller's remorse. Yes, seller's remorse. So I'll say, so that's the halacha in the Mishnah. So again, a very simple and straightforward halacha. 2 criteria. Number one, so Reuven recognizes his property in the possession of someone else. He has made a claim of burglary, and people are talking about the fact that there was a robbery, that there was a burglary. So what's the halacha? Shimon the purchaser swears, I bought the object for X amount of dollars. Reuven pays him that amount, effectively buys back his property, and Selma Yisrael. Good, says the Gemara. I don't understand. Just because people are talking about the fact that there was a burglary, right, that there was a robbery, that Reuven's property was stolen, why should that matter? Maybe Reuven, in fact, sold the property. He had seller's remorse. And Reuven is starting the call. In other words, we'll say, we all know, it does not take all that much, right, to get people talking about something, right? All you need to do is float it a little bit. So maybe Reuven sold it legitimately, has seller's remorse, and now he begins the rumor mill. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Kigon Shebo Bnei Adam Esok Beiso, Va'amar Ve'figan Balayla, Va'amar Nignevu Kelai. So we'll say, now what's the case? Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav. The case over here is where Reuven had people staying in his house, and then again, in the middle of the night, he goes in and starts claiming stuff was stolen from me. So in this case, Rabbi Yehuda said this is more like circumstantial evidence, being that he had people in his home. So Lamai said there's grounds to believe it. Gemara says, Kol Shekain, Ila Matzah. I don't understand. Even more so, if Reuven wants to invent information, right, or wants to create an alternate reality, the fact that there are people staying in his house gives him the ability to do so. In other words, what the Gemara is just trying to figure out is just it's so easy for Reuven to begin this rumor and give him the ability to get back his stuff. So the Gemara says, Rav Kahana v'saibam shvei Rav kigon shahaisa machteres chatura b'soch beiso v'gam b'nei adam shalano b'soch beiso yatzu v'an burkaos shel kelim al kisvehem v'akol omrim nignevu kelav shel ploni. All right, so we'll say, so listen to this. So now Rav Kahana goes ahead and highlights the name of Rav. Here's the case. The case is where somebody dug a tunnel into Reuven's house, and people who were staying in Reuven's house left Reuven's house with bags of stuff over their shoulders. All right, so it's either Shabbos leftovers or all his stuff. So we'll say, so this so the Gemara says and Reuven's claiming I was robbed. I suppose say, so this is a pretty strong case. In other words, you have enough circumstantial evidence. The tunnel, they're walking out with the stuff on their shoulder. These are people who had access to Reuven's stuff because Reuven had invited them to stay at his home. So you put all of this together, and you have a pretty strong circumstantial case that indeed Reuven was robbed. V'dilma kelim havu saram lo havu. So I was thinking, maybe they just stole utensils, but they didn't steal any books. No, we'll say part of the rumor, part of the claim was that they took utensils and svarim. V'leichaj dilma zutri v'katon ravravi Maybe they only took small books or small utensils, and he's claiming large books for large utensils. Reuven's making very specific claims. They took so and so and so and so items. Maybe they stole old stuff, and he's claiming new stuff. Amrav kigon da amri halalu kelav shalploni halalav svarav shalploni. We're talking about a case over here where people recognize that these utensils are utensils that belong to these utensils, or these svarim belong to Reuven. Okay, so we'll say, so that's how we're setting this up. So we'll say, so let's pause here for just a second. So what's happening? So a very simple case, right? Reuven goes ahead and sees his stuff in the hands of Shimon. Reuven makes a claim, that's my stuff. Okay. In addition to Reuven's claim, there's also a call, right? There's also like a whole rumor going around, more than a rumor. There's discussion that Reuven was robbed. Now what the Gemara adds in, there's also circumstantial evidence. There was tunneling into Reuven's home. People who stayed there, right, left with stuff on their shoulders. So you put all of this together, Abosai, and kind of the narrative we construct, we're not accusing Shimon of being a thief, but rather we're saying that Shimon must have bought property from whoever stole it from Reuven. Therefore, what does the halacha give Reuven the right to do? The halacha gives Reuven the right to buy back his property. That's what it is. As opposed to saying, listen, Reuven, sorry, unless you could prove something, then there's nothing to do here. The halacha says there's enough circumstantial evidence over here to say the stuff that's in Shimon's possession is really Reuven's. But again, Shimon, no one has a right to put Shimon at a disadvantage. So therefore, Reuven, we give you the right to buy back your property. Shimon, swear, how much did you buy your property for? Reuven, give him that amount. Reuven gets back his property. Shimon is made whole, and Shalom Am Yisroel. Really fascinating case. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, good. Did Rav really say this? Remember again, I will say, Rav was the one who set up this case as the circumstantial evidence. Somebody had tunneled into Reuven's house. The people who were staying there left with bags of stuff over their shoulders. Did Rav really say this? Rav said, I will say, now watch this. This is fascinating. Baba Machteres. Excuse me. I will say, Baba Machteres means like this. Okay, I'm good, thank you. Baba Machteres means like this. Baba Machteres means somebody breaks into your home at night to steal stuff. Now, Baal Maktaris means any situation. It literally means someone who comes to steal covertly. Now, listen to this. Rav says that when someone comes to steal property covertly, v'natal kelim v'yatza. So let's say he was successful. He's right. So we'll say, so watch this. So Reuven breaks into Shimon's house. Or let's say better, Shimon tunnels into Reuven's house, right? Comes under the cover of darkness, or right, secretively, and steals stuff from Shimon. What's the halacha? And let's say again, Shimon steals from Reuven, right? And now let's say what happens. Shimon gets out of there. He gets away with it, right? He gets in, he gets out. What's the halacha? Potter. Listen to this. Shimon, the thief, is Potter. Now we'll say, why? Well done, right? Well done, right? Why is he Potter? We'll say this is wild. Why is he Potter? My taima bidami kaninu. Because I will say, listen to this. Get ready. I will say, what is the halacha if you find someone breaking into your house at night, right? Surreptitiously. What's the halacha? You are allowed to kill them. You're allowed to kill them, right? We'll say, in other words, we had the castle domain before legal. In other words, somebody's coming into your house under the cover of darkness. You do not know what's happening there, right? You don't know what's going on. Furthermore, again, I will say, a thief knows that very often a homeowner is going to defend his home and his property by any means necessary. Watch this. Therefore, when you are habab machteres, when you are a thief who steals repetitiously, you are doing so with risk to your own life. And in fact, technically speaking, you're liable to death. In other words, since the homeowner is empowered to take your life, thief's life, in order to protect his homestead, it's almost as if the thief is liable to a death penalty. Now, therefore, this makes it a case of what? Kimle b'derabba minei. It's fascinating. So in this moment now, the thief is liable to death because, again, the homeowner has the right to kill him in order to go ahead and... Now, obviously, again, if the guy's, standing their hands up, and you can't kill him, right? But Lamaisa, in other words, if you do not know what's going on over here, in the confusion or ambiguity of the moment, it's understood that the homeowner is going to protect his home, is going to protect his property by any means necessary. As such, the thief, so to speak, is liable to a death penalty. This makes it kimei b'drabamine, so it's a death penalty and financial liability simultaneously. So this is incredible, no? So therefore, technically speaking, if the thief makes it out alive, he's pater. He's pater. Now, we'll see the halacha l'mayis on this, right? But he's pater. He's pater. The idea is that he is not chayiv for any financial liability. Why? Because he was subject to a death penalty. So we'll say. So therefore, again, going back for just a second, Rav set this up as a whole case of tunneling. As a whole case of tunneling. That's hababa machteres. So why should the thief have any level of liability? So the Gemara says, "Hani mili dekanin about machteres. The meikara master nafshi l'ktala." So we'll say that's true. That's true. When really the entire theft kind of took place through tunneling. Since he was ready to give his life for this, so therefore kimli b'drabamine ultimately acquires the object. Aval hani kevim de lo masrin avshayu l'ktala lo. Remember again, this was different. In this case over here, remember again, and the way Rav set it up, there was a tunnel, but remember, the thieves didn't get in there through the tunnel. How did they get in there? They were invited guests. So this is not the same kind of case, right? Because remember again, they're not putting their life in mortal danger. The only time you're putting your life in mortal danger for the thief is when you're breaking in. But since they were invited in, this wouldn't be a case. Very interesting. Amar Rava. So Rava says as follows. Both say last line. Kuf Yud Daled Amud Beis. Very interesting. Amar Rava. Lo shana ela balabais also limkar kelov. Furthermore, again, I will say, when does this halacha apply, like we see in the Mishnah? Only if Ruvain is the type of balabayis who normally sells his stuff. Ava balabayis she'eno osrei limkar kelov. But I will say, balabayis who does not normally sell his stuff. Top of Kuf Tesvav 115a. Then the Gemara says, Lo tzarech la dure alei. Kulehai. Rashi says over here, right? Lo tzarech la dure alei kulehai. Rashi says, the name of Sefer Ploni Uploni. I will say, if you remember again, previously in the Gemara, we're speaking about the idea that in order for this whole mechanism to work, of Reuven to be able to buy back his stuff, it has to be that's what? That we have very specific information about the stolen objects. So the Gemara is not qualifying this and says, this is only talking about a balabas who normally sells his stuff. But if a balabais doesn't normally sell his stuff, so therefore it would be uncommon for his property to be in the hands of someone else, you don't have to have this same level of specificity in order to be able to trigger the reclamation process. The Gemara says the Dilma itzterich le'lezuze v'zabin, but maybe Reuven needed money, so decided to go ahead and sell off his stuff. Am Rav Ashi harei yatsa lo shem geneva b'yer. No, Rav Ashi says no. We take care of that. That's not a concern. Why? Because remember, as we set it up, people are already talking about that a theft took place. So because we were talking about theft took place, we assume that Reuven is not selling stuff off of his own volition, but rather again he was robbed. All right, let's go back to it. This is a fascinating case. Itmar. Ganav umachar ve'achaka chokra ganav. Watch this. So let's say Shimon stole an object from Reuven. Shimon stole from Reuven, and then I will say what happens, and he went ahead and he sold it to Levi. Now remember again, Levi is an innocent party over here. So right now, as it stands, Levi is in possession of Reuven's object that he obtained through the theft of Shimon. Okay. After Levi purchases, after Levi now owns it, so the whole theft becomes discovered, and people now Reuven knows that it was Shimon who stole the object from him. So before we get into this, understand what's happening over here. If you're Reuven, right? What's the shayla? Who are you going after? Are you going after Shimon the thief, or are you going after Levi, the current owner, so to speak, in quotations, right? Current owner of the object. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Silber Amar Hadin im Harishon. So Rav says that ultimately again Reuven, who is ultimately again the owner, Reuven's his claim is against the thief, is against Shimon. Look at Rashi. Hadin im Harishon. Rashi says, Dino shabal abayis utfiasa alaganafi ve'ina lokeach bal dino ve'imbalag vos hemenu yitain damim v'af agav shukar aganov lo'armini yachzer lokeach kelim bechina v'yiframin aganav. So listen to this. So because we know the thief, Reuven's claim is against Shimon, the thief. In other words, what Rav is saying is like this, is Reuven can't go to Levi and say, Levi, that's my object, give it back to me. Give it back to me. In other words, Rashi points out over here is, if Reuven does want to go to Levi to get his object back, he can do that. But what does he have to do? What does he have to do? He's got to pay. He's got to pay. But assuming he does not want to pay, what he does is he goes to Shimon the thief and he sues him for damages, for theft. But again, he has no recourse. Reuven, the owner of that, has no recourse against Levi the buyer. His only recourse is against Shimon the thief. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, natural. Reuven has recourse against Levi, the purchaser. Rashi says, Adinu Hasheni, Dino shal balabayis im elokeachu, v'yotzi menu kelev bechinam. So we'll say, so Rabbi Yochanan says, not true. Reuven could go over to Levi, the purchaser, say, Levi, that is my object, and I'm taking it back, and he doesn't have to pay Levi anything. He takes it. Then Rabbi will say, of course, what's the rest of that story? So Levi, the purchaser, will go to Shimon the thief. We'll say, such a fascinating case, no? So fundamental machlokes, let's analyze this. Rabbi Yosef says the truth is, lo pligi, they're not really arguing. Kan lifnei yeyosh hadin, kan lifnei yeyosh. One is talking about, I will say, before Reuven, the original owner, had yeyosh. If Reuven didn't yet have yeyosh hadin masheni, then I will say, if Reuven didn't have yeyosh, then what? Then he can go to Levi, the purchaser, and say, Levi, that's my object. I would never have yeyosh. Therefore, the object never left my possession. Give it back to me. Kan la'achar yeyosh, and I will say, as opposed to if Reuven had yeyosh, then hadin im harishon. Then again, I will say, assuming he had yeyosh, he gave up hope of ever retrieving the object. The object, therefore, again, effectively transferred over to Levi, and therefore Reuven's claim is only against the thief. Incredible. V'tarvahu isluhu d'Rav Chisda. And I will say, ultimately, both of them go ahead and hold over Rav Chisda. Now, what did Rav Chisda say? I will say, take a look at Rashi, 3 lines down from the top in the wide lines. Rav Chisda, Gazal lo Mesiashu abaylim. Rav Chisda said as follows: if you stole an object, right? Shimon stole from Reuven, and Reuven did not have yeyosh. Lo Mesiashu abaylim. Uba achar va'achlo, and someone else came along and consumed the object. Ratza mizegova. We just had this not so long ago. So Rav Chisda says, essentially, the owner of the object could collect damages from either party, right? Either from the thief or from the person who consumed the object. Okay, so really Abaye velo pligi. So Abaye says, really, they're not. No one's arguing. So the Gemara says, ha matnos kuhuna kilifnei yeyosh dami upligi. Yet they say, let's take a look at the case of matnos kuhuna, right? Matnos kuhuna is like a case of before yeyosh, and yet there is a machlokes. What's the case of matnos kuhuna? Listen to this interesting case. This nan. Amrlo, machar li me'er shalpara. So we'll say, let's watch this. Right? Reuven goes over to Shimon, and Shimon's a butcher, and he says to Shimon, sell me the kishkas of the cow. Sell me the innards of the cow. V'haya b'hain mataros. And I will say, now, included in those kishkas, remember again, a kohen, there are matnos kuhuna from every time you shecht an animal, right? There's the chest and the foreleg, right? Ultimately go to the kohen, parts of the stomach as well. The more, right? So we'll say, so now let's say I go ahead, I go to the butcher, and I purchase kishkas from the innards from the animal, and inside of those kishkas, inside are matnos kuhuna, right? In other words, the butcher never separated out the kohanic portion. They know. So what's the halacha? So matanos. No sin the kohen. So I, the purchaser, am obligated to give those portions to the kohen. Now this is very interesting. Now we'll say I can't go ahead and subtract off the purchase price. In other words, I have to separate out the kohanic gifts, but I am not permitted to go ahead and take that off the purchase price that I'm giving to the butcher. Okay. Conversely, lakach mehen b'mishkal. Let's say I bought the kishkas in weight. So I bought, 20 pounds of kishka, right? Kishkas, right? In a cow innards. And I will say, so now, same case, I have to remove some of it to give to Kohanim. In that case, no sla Kohen, umenakilo min adamim. In that case, I go ahead and, I give the stomach or whatever else to the Kohen, and I am permitted to go ahead and take that off the purchase price. So both say it's interesting, which makes sense. In the first case, I'm buying an amount, lav dafka, a weight. So therefore, again, it's understood that I have to separate out part of matnos kuhuna, and therefore I can't take that off the purchase price. When you're buying by weight, Again, that weight includes the part that's going to be mine. Anything that's going to be matnos kuna comes off the purchase price. Rav said, we'll say first white line, Rav, lo shanu ella sheshakal liatzmo. So we'll say, when is this true? When is this true? When is what true? In other words, that when you buy by weight, you could subtract off the amount that is the matnos kuna from the purchase price. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, Lo shanu, lakach hemena b'mishkal, nostan lekoin, demasha delakeach al karchach nostan lekoin, vo yitva damim ala min hamocher. So we'll say, so when do we say that I, the purchaser, have to give to the coin, and then settle up a diminished price with the butcher? Lo shanu lo sheshakal liatzmo. That's only if I went ahead and weighed it myself. Aval shakal lo atabach. But ultimately, if the butcher went ahead and weighed the insides of the cow, then hadin im hatabach. Then ultimately, the kohen has to settle up together with the butcher. Look at Rashi. Hadin im hatabach. Dino shal kohen ve'iruro ala tabachu. Then the kohen has to settle up with the butcher himself. Rav l'tamei da'amr hadin im harishon. The tabach kineged rishon v'lokeach havisheni. So we'll say, so this is very interesting. Because what's happening over here is, in this kind of case, this would almost be like a situation of someone who stole. This would be like the case of Shimon who stole from Ruvain and sold to Levi. So when the butcher goes ahead and sells me cow insides and didn't remove the matnos kahuna, and the butcher weighed it himself and sold it to me. So this is like the butcher stealing from the kohen, selling it to another party, in which case the kohen, who is the affected party, has to go ahead and settle up with the rishon, settle up with the tabach. To which the Gemara says, no, I'd rather read it as the kohen could even go after the butcher, not just me. So what would you have said? Perhaps Kohanic gifts can't be stolen, and they're considered as if they're always in the possession of the Kohen. Kamash Molam, that they can. Ula Abai Damar Pligi b'mai Pligi. And according to Abai, who says that they argue, what are they arguing about? They're arguing about the statement of Rav Chisda. Okay, so therefore I will say, we are still left with our original machlokes, right? Shimon steals from Ruvain, sells it to Levi. After the sale to Levi, Shimon's identity as a thief becomes recognized. So now, who does Ruvain go after for his object? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Rav says, Ruvain's claim is only against the thief. Ruvain has no claim against Levi. And if he wants to get his object back from Levi, he's going to have to pay him, but he can't seize it back from Levi. Rabbi Yochanan says, absolutely not. Ruvain could even go right to Levi, seize his object, and no obligation of compensation. Okay, so let's analyze. Rav Zavid Amar Kigon, Shnesiyai Shah Bailim Biad Lokef, Onesiyai Shul Biad Ganav. Oh, this is very interesting. Rav Zavid said, what's the case over here? The case is where Ruvain, the owner, had Yeosh, but only once the object reached the hands of the purchaser, of Levi, and didn't have Yeosh when it was in the hands of the Ganav. Interesting. Here's what they're arguing about. Now, I will say, remember we had this before? Yeosh by itself doesn't work, right? In order for someone else to acquire a stolen object, there's really two things that have to occur. Remember again, what are the two things? Number one, shinui rishus, a change of domain, and yeosh. What we're going to see now is, does the order of those two things matter? So watch this. The Gemara says, one opinion says that if yeosh occurs first and then shinui rishus, it works. The Gemara says, however, shinui rishus v'achar yeosh lo kani. But if the change of domain occurred before yeosh, that doesn't work. In other words, that it's order specific. It's order specific. It's yeosh first and then shinui rishus. Umar, so the other opinion says, lo shana. No, it doesn't matter what order it occurs, as long as you have both yeosh and shinui rishus. So then ultimately, the new purchaser or the new acquirer truly owns the object. Okay, Rav Safra Amar Beglima Dikuli Amalo Pligi Dardala Mare. So what Rav Papa says, if we're talking about a case of like a cloak, in other words, that the stolen object is extant, everyone agrees that Levi, the purchaser, is going to give that back to Ruvain, the original owner. V'hacha bi'asu bo takanas hashukam eflagi. So Rabbi will say here, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is, in this case, you're going to say, same case, Shimon stole from Ruvain, sold it to Levi. Afterwards, again, we discover the identity of the thief. It's Shimon. Now, who does Ruvain go after? So we'll say, so the machlokes over here is, do we, in a case like this, do we institute takanas hashuk for the benefit of Levi? Now we'll say, what's takanas hashuk? This goes back to our Mishnah. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, takanas hashuk, al shekino lokeach b'shuk befarhesya, v'lo haven bo shenignav, asulo takana she'ishayin lo bala ba'is mosa. So we'll say, takanas hashuk essentially is what we would call buyer protection. In a case where a person purchases something in the marketplace or in a way that has the appearance of an absolutely normal and legitimate transaction, but it turns out that the object is stolen. So and this is our Mishnah, So Takanas Hashuk says, if you as a purchaser had no reason to assume that there is anything wrong with this transaction, halacha protects you. And what's the buyer protection? What's buyer protection? Buyer protection is, even if though it turns out you bought stolen property, the owner of the object has an absolute right to come to you and take his object. But what? He has to pay. I will say, that's takanas hashuk. That's halachic buyer protection. So I will say, now watch this. The question is, in this case, we're talking about over here, is there buyer protection? Rav Mishvei Rabbi Chia Amar. So watch this. Rav Neiman Rabbi Chia said, Hadinim Arishon, that Ruvain, the original owner of the object, could only collect from Shimon the thief. Why? So Dina dilokeach delishkol zuzim miganov. Dina dilokeach delishkol zuzim miganov. V'lo asaba takanas hashuk. Who says ultimately again the halacha should be that lokeach should go ahead and capture his loss from the ganov, and therefore they didn't institute takanas hashuk. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, the halacha is that his din is with Levi. Dina delokeach delishko mi balabayis v'asubot takanas hashuk. Okay, v'sava Rav lo asubot. I said the Gemara wants to just that's the machlokes. V'sava Rav lo asubot takanas hashuk. Does Rav say that we don't institute over here takanas hashuk? V'ha Rav Huna talmidei de Rav Hava. Yet Rav Huna, listen to this case. Rav Huna was the Talmud of Rav. V'chanan bisha ganav glima v'zabna. This guy Chanan bisha, Chanan the bad one. That's his name, right? Or at least that was, and that his mother didn't give him the name. But I'm saying that was his ascribed name, right? So Chanan bisha ganav glima stole a cloak v'zabna and he sold it. Now what happened? So we'll say, so now what happens? So now, obviously in this case, we'll say you have, so same case, right? Hanan stole it from Ruvain and sold it to Levi. So now, at this point, we recognize that Hanan went ahead and stole it and sold it. So now, who does Ruvain go after? Does Ruvain go after Hanan or does Ruvain go after Levi, the purchaser? Amar le'elahu gavra zil shari avitach. So Rav Huna said to the guy, to the owner, look at Rashi, Zil Shari Avitach, Hatar Mashkoncha Kilomar, Pedei Mashkoncha Shebiyado. So I'll say, interestingly enough, so Rav Huna said to the owner of the object, go to Levi and buy back your item. In other words, you can get it back from Levi, but you have to buy it back. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Shiny Chanan Bisha, Kevan. So we'll say again, this is a case of Hooker Aganov, right? This is a case of where we know who the thief is, and yet you see clearly that Rav Huna is saying, sorry, right, owner of the object, go ahead, and your claim is really against the thief. If you want to go ahead and you want to get it back from the third party, then go ahead and get it, but you have to pay. So the Gemara says, Shiny Chanan Bisha, Kevan deleka lishtalume mine kilo hooker dummy. We'll say Chanan Bisha is different. Why? Because we'll say apparently Chanan Bisha wasn't only known to be a thief, but he was also a relatively powerful guy, and there was absolutely no hope of getting any level of compensation from him. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. In general, even in the case of where, let's say we say that owner has the right to go to buyer, right? That Reuven has the right to go to Levi, get his object back without paying Levi. The assumption is what's going to happen next. Levi is going to be able to go to the thief and reclaim his money from the thief. In this case over here, there is no getting any money back from Chanan Bisha. So as such, Rav Huna thought it was inappropriate to leave the buyer in the lurch like this. So therefore, he said to the owner, You go to Levi, get back your item, but you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it. The Gemara says, now watch this. So I just want to point out what we have. Let's just pause here for just a moment. So here's what we have happening. What we have happening is the Mishnah introduced to us this concept that if I have property that's stolen from me, and then I see that property in the hands of someone else, the halacha is I can go and I can reclaim that property. But again, now in the Mishnah's case, what has to happen? The purchaser, right? Let's just use the case, right? So Shimon stole from Reuven, right? Sold to Levi, right? So now Reuven could go to Levi and get his stuff back. But what does Levi do? According to the Mishnah, Levi makes a shvuah, swears I paid, $1,000 for this, and I pay him. Now, what is that based on? That is based on Takonas Hashok. That is based on Chazal's legislated buyer protection. Now, when someone buys something in a legitimate transaction, and it turns out that it was stolen, the halacha is buyer protection. So as the owner of the object, I have the right to get back my property. But because the purchaser bought it in a legitimate transaction, he's protected, and I essentially have to pay to get back my stuff, as unfair as that seems. Now, the interesting kind of corollary case is, same case. Shimon steals from Reuven, right? Sells it to Levi, but in this case, the identity of the thief becomes known. So I will say, so now, then we have a machlokes, who are we going after in that case, right? So now you have Reuven the owner. Who is Reuven the owner going after in that case, right? Is Reuven going after the thief, or is Reuven going after the purchaser? So that's our machlokes. And I will say what we see over here is Takonas Hashuk is kind of this overarching principle. Now watch this, a very important qualification. Amar Rava, im ganav meforsamhu lo asabo Takonas Hashuk. So I will say this is incredible. Now, Takonas Hashuk, buyer protection only applies when the buyer has every reason to assume, right? Buyer has every reason to assume that this is a legitimate transaction. But if the buyer purchases from a known thief, then I will say there's no buyer protection in that case. So for example, if it was known that Shimon was a thief, right? Shimon stole from Reuven, sold it to Levi, right? And Levi bought it from him, right? And I will say again, it's known that Shimon is a thief, right? He's got a whole boutique out of his trunk, right? So again, this doesn't look on the up and up over here, and it's clear he's known as a thief. There's no buyer protection in that case. In that case, I will say that Reuven has the ability to go to Levi and get back his stuff. Why? Again, the logic is very simple. Chazal only protected you when it was clear that when it was felt that you were engaging in a legitimate transaction. Now, I watched this, but here's the problem. What about the case you just mentioned? V'chanan bisha dimeforsim hava. Rabbi say Chanan bisha. We just had this case, right? The guy who bought property from Chanan bisha, right? Chanan, the bad guy, and yet again, they instituted Tachanas Hashuk for him. So the Gemara says, "Vasbat Tachanas Hashuk." The Gemara says, "Incredible." Nehi demeforsam lebishusa lignevusa lo meforsam. Let's say, watch this. He had a reputation for being a bad guy, but he didn't have a reputation for theft. Incredible, I will say. In other words, we speak about this all the time. Even Chanan Bisha will say, again, you do not get that nickname, right? And will say, I just want to point out, Chanan Bisha, right, he is memorialized for all eternity in Shas by this name. Which means that he never did Shuvah, because if he did Shuvah, then we wouldn't record him in this way. But Lamais, I shouldn't say we didn't. Who knows what he did or what he didn't do. But the fact that Chazal went ahead and codified him like this is pretty dramatic. But Rabbi say, what you see is like this. All of us live with our inconsistencies. You see about this all the time. And just because at the end of the day, I am a sinner in one area, does not make me a rasha in all areas. We all have our areas of inconsistency. We all have our areas of weaknesses. And I will say, but it's very important to know, the beauty of Yiddishkeit and the beauty of spirituality in general is that it's not an all or nothing proposition. Just because I am a spiritual failure in certain areas does not mean that I'm a failure in all areas. And just because I'm a failure in certain areas doesn't mean that I can't be successful in others. Isn't this incredible? This guy, Chanan Bisha, whatever he did that got him this nickname, but he wasn't a known thief. He wasn't a known thief. At the end of the day, again, he wasn't the thief. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, it could very well be that takonas hashuk would even apply to a transaction with him. Such an incredible house. We'll say, sometimes we get so down on ourselves because we know that there's an area in which I'm so weak, in which I'm so broken, and we think that because I'm so weak and so broken in this one area, there's no hope for me in other areas. But that's not true. If Hanan Bisha could do it, then I will say, certainly I could do it as well. Dramatic. Itmar, let's go. We're making great time over here. Itmar, Ganav Upara Chovov. I'd like to announce the new formation of an Am Yisroel shir. We're starting the Maseches Bava Kama. Now what are we going to do? Itmar, Ganav Upara B'Chovov. I will say it's too good. It's just too good to. We're already going so fast as it is. It's just too good to go any faster. We'll make it through. Itmar, Ganav Upara B'Chovov. So we'll say, now watch this. Ganavu para behekefo lo asubo takanas hashok. So this is actually a very interesting case as well. So the Gemara says, here's the situation. A person went ahead and stole and paid off his debt, right? Or stole and paid off a collateral. Lo asubo takanas hashok. So we'll say, in this case, Chazal didn't institute a takanas hashok. So let me just show you what happened over here, right? So same case. Shimon stole from Ruvain, but in this case, again, still Shimon gave it to Levi. But why did Shimon give it to Levi? Why did he give it to Levi? Because he owed Levi money, right? Or he had a deposit. He had something collateralized with Levi. So he's using the stolen money to pay off a debt. So in this case, I will say, now, same case. Turns out, again, Shimon becomes recognized as the thief. Reuven recognizes now that Levi has his stuff. What's the halacha? Reuven could go right to Levi and take his stuff without payment. There's no takanas hashuk in this case. Why is there no takanas hashuk in this case? The Amri lo adaita dahano yohavis lemidi. We'll say it's very simple, because we'll say in this case over here, Levi didn't lend Shimon the money with the understanding that he was going to be furnished with Reuven's object. In other words, we'll say takanas hashuk is only applied when there is a clear transactional reliance. But when there wasn't a transactional reliance, then we don't apply takanas hashuk. In other words, remember, before Shimon ever stole an object from Reuven, what did he do? Levi lent him money, which means Levi lent him money reliant on something totally different. So because of that, when Shimon then pays back the debt with Reuven's property, we don't apply takanas hashuk in that case. But again, halacha l'maisa, Reuven is able to go right to Levi and reclaim his object. It's very interesting. Take a look at Rashi. Lava daite. Rashi says, the Hy'd gineva yahavte lezuze didekame hachi osvislei. This is fascinating. In other words, the loan that Levi made to Shimon happened long before Shimon ever stole anything from Reuven. As such, there was no reliance on the object or on the money, or whatever it was, that Shimon subsequently stole from Reuven and gave to Levi. Because of that, Chazal did not afford buyer protection in this kind of case. So interesting. Gemara goes weiter. Da'ano Yov is good. Mashkanta shavi masan b'meya asuvot takanas hashuk. So I will say, mashkavi shava masan b'meya. Let's say, look at this case. Look at Rashi. Mashkanta shav. No, not yet. So mashkanta shavi masan b'meya. Let's say again, there was a collateral that was worth 200, and he gave him this object worth 100. Asuvot takanas hashuk. In that case, they institute takanas hashuk. Shav b'shava. What about for an equal amount? In other words, that the amount given was equal to the amount of the collateral. So what's that? Meir said, in this case, they do not do takanas hashuk. Rashi says because that's an uncommon case. Marzucha Amar Asuvot takanas hashuk. Marzucha said no, they do takanas hashuk. Zvina shava b'shava. What happens if it was a sale? Right, it was a sale for equal amounts. Then Asuvot takanas hashuk. Then they made takanas hashuk in that case. Shava mana b'masan. What happens if it was worth 100 for 200? Rav Sheshes Amar Lo Asavot Takanas Hashuk. Rav Sheshes they didn't do Takanas Hashuk in that case. Rava Amar Asavot Takanas Hashuk. V'Hilchasa, we'll say the halacha is Bekulu in all of these cases. Asu Bo Takanas Hashuk Lebar Miganav Upara B'Chovo Ganav Upara B'Hekefo. And we'll say the bottom line the Gemara says is Takanas Hashuk applies in any case where the buyer bought assuming that this was a legitimate transaction, and then it turns out to be stolen property. The only exception where takanas hashuk doesn't apply is again about saying the case of a loan, where again Shimon had borrowed money from Reuven beforehand, from Levi, and then stolen object from Ruvain, use the stolen object to go and repay Levi. In that case, Takanas Ashuk doesn't apply, and the logic is sound. The logic is because the loan transaction had nothing to do with the property that Shimon subsequently stole from Ruvain. Because again, the loan was made way before the theft ever occurred. Therefore, there's no buyer protection in such a case like that. But in any other case, I will say, where there is a legitimate transaction, we do apply the buyer protection of Takanas Hashuk. Quite fascinating. I will say, now the one case that we don't yet have the halacha l'maisa for is again the machlokes Rav and Rav Yochanan. We're still going to come back to that case. We'll see the Rav in the next sugi with this. I will say that's the case of where Hooker Haganov, right? Shimon steals from Ruvain, sells it to Levi. We now discover who Shimon is. Who does Ruvain go after? Does Bipashtos, it kind of becomes clear. Why does it become clear? Who does Ruvain go after in that case? Who does he go after? He really has to go after the thief. Because also, remember again, once you have Takanas Hashuk, once you have buyer protection says that Levi, as long as Levi was a legitimate, what appeared to be a legitimate transaction, Levi's covered. If Levi's covered, that means if Ruvain wants to go to Levi, he can. But what does he have to do? He has to pay. So it sounds like in that machlokes, it really sounds like we're passing like Rav, that in this kind of case where there was a legitimate transaction, Levi's protected by Takanas Hashuk, and Ruvain's only recourse is really against the thief himself. All right, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Avimi bar Nazi, Chamud Ravina Hava. So we'll say, so Avimi bar Nazi was the father-in-law of Ravina. Hava Masik Pao Gavra Abra Zuzi. He lent the guy 4 zuz. So what happened? Ganav Galima, Asinehele. So what happened? So apparently the borrower went ahead and stole a cloak. All right, unbeknownst to Avimi, he stole a cloak. And it sounds like that cloak was like repayment for the first 4 zuz. Osve arba zuzi achrini. And therefore, again, Avimi lent him another 4 zuz. Lusof hokaragan. I will say, at the end of the day, it turned out that it became clear that the borrower was really a thief. Also coming to Ravina. So they brought this case before Ravina. Amar kamai ganav upara bechaval. So I will say, so listen to this. So essentially Avimi said like this. We look at the first kamoi ganav upara b'chavo. We'll say this sounds like a case of a thief who paid off his debt with stolen property. V'lo bay lemeisavle v'lo midi hanach arba zuzi achrini shakel zuzach v'hader glimi. I will say, but the second set of zuzim, right? Return the money, right? Take your money and ultimately give back the cloak. Maskef l'rav coin v'dilma glima bahani zuzi kamay havnihile. But maybe the cloak ultimately again was given by the first set of zuzim. Ganav opara b'chavo, ganav opara b'hekefo. So v'arba zuzi basray, and Meir will say this should be a case of a thief who stole, paid off his debt, or a thief who stole and paid off his collateral. In which case, again, Takanas Hashuk doesn't apply. V'arba zuzi basray hemune hemini, and maybe for the second set of zuzim, ultimately the cloak has nothing to do with anything. But maybe the cloak was, he just gave him the zuz because he felt he was a credible individual. So the matter escalated. It came over Rabbi Avo. Amar hilchasa krav koin. He passed in the halachas like what Rav Kohen said before. Narsha ganav safra zvine lepapunai betimnin zuzi. All right, so let's say another case. Excuse me. This Narshan, these are nationalities. This Narsha guy, he stole a sefer and he sold it to a papunai for 80 zuz, betamnin zuzi. Azal papunai zabni lebar mechuz. And b'mei ve'esrim, the papunai took it. He resold it for 120. Okay, l'sof hokaraganav. At the end, right? They found out who the thief was. Amar Abaye lezel mari desafra. So we'll say, so now, who do you go after? What do you go after for? Let the owner of the sefer go. V'yarav lebar mechuz tamnin. Let him give it to the guy who brought right for the mechuzah. Give him 80 zuz. V'shakal safrei. Let him get back his sefer. V'azal bar mechuzah. V'shakal arban papanoi. Let the mechuzah guy go and collect another 40 from the papanoi. Maskef l'arava. Hashal lokech mi ganav azul takanas hashuk. Lokech mi boy. I don't say, if there's buyer protection for someone who buys from a thief, Allah has kama v'kama, there should be buyer protection for who? For a guy, for the purchaser, from the purchaser. Allah Amar Rava, rather, what should happen in this case? Lezel marei the safra. let the owner of the sefer come along. Let him give to the guy who bought from the mechuzin, right, 120 zuz. V'shakal safar, let him take back his book. In other words, he has to pay full price to go at the final purchase price to get back his sefer. V'leizel mar de safra, v'leshkal arbami paponoi, v'tamdim in narashah. And let the guy who bought it for 120, he'll collect 40 from the paponoi and 80 from the narashah. Okay, we'll say takeaway. What's the takeaway? What's the takeaway? Number one takeaway is we move very slowly. Number two takeaway, I will say. Number two takeaway is that halacha l'maisa, I will say there is something called takanas hashuk. Takanas hashuk is buyer protection. Buyer protection means that if it turns out you stole stolen property, you bought stolen property, but you had every reason to believe that it was a legitimate transaction, halacha l'maisa, you are covered. And if the owner of the object wants to get that back from you, then what does he do? He pays you the amount that you paid. Now, I want to point out, let's say you say, but I don't want to sell it, I don't want to give it back, so that you don't have the right to do. Once it's been determined that it's stolen property, you must give it back, but you are entitled to be made whole for the full purchase price. That is takanas hashavin. If, however, we'll say, when doesn't takanas hashavin apply? If you buy from a known thief, then which makes sense. The halacha doesn't go ahead and cover you. If it turns out to both say that we identify who the thief is, who does the owner have recourse against? Because takanas hashavin really only has recourse against the thief, doesn't have recourse against the buyer. Incredible. Mishnah. Zeba b'chalis shem, zeba b'chalis shal dvash. We actually made reference to this case last week. Watch this. Ruvain is carrying a barrel of wine. Shimon is carrying a barrel of honey. What happens? Nistika chavish shal dvash. Now we'll say, now this case presupposes that honey is more valuable than wine in this particular case. So what happens? So now we'll say, I don't remember who I said what, but okay, the owner of the barrel of the honey, nistika chavish shal dvash. So v'shofech zes, hitzlas hadvash l'socho. So watch this. We'll say, so honey guy, wine guy. Honey guy, his barrel cracks. What did wine guy do? Wine guy dumps out the contents of his barrel in order to save his friend's honey. Okay, so we'll say, now what's the halacha? Amud beis, ein lo ela scharo. So we'll say, so now remember again, wine guy, after this whole thing happens, wine guy, feeling like the hero, says, you know what is he expecting from honey guy? What is he expecting from honey guy? Full compensation for his lost wine. So honey guy says, I didn't ask you to do any of this. So we'll say, the halacha is with the honey guy, and honey guy is only obligated to go ahead and give wine guy what? Scharo. We'll say, scharo means labor. Labor, literally again, the use, which means essentially barrel rental and work. Barrel rental and work. Okay? However, if wine guy said to honey guy, listen, honey guy, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to dump out my wine, save your honey, but you need to pay me for my wine and for any other incurred services. And honey guy says, yes, then chayiv litelo. Then ultimately, again, which makes sense. Honey guy is obligated to go ahead and compensate wine guy for the value of his wine. Shut off, similar case. Shut off nachal chamoro, the chamor chavero, shalo yafem mana v'shal chavero masayim. So we'll say, now watch this. You have two donkey guys, right? One guy has a donkey that's worth $1,000, and another guy has a donkey that's worth $2,000. He got the full trim on the donkey package, right? He's got heated seats, right? He's got everything, right? So Lamaisa gets, now what happens? Now they're both in the river. So what happens? Expensive donkey guy's about to get swept away for the current. So cheap donkey guy says to expensive donkey guy, here's the deal, right? He doesn't say anything. So what does he do? He says, let's say some shalom to his cheap donkey. Let's get swept downstream in order to save expensive donkey. He then goes over to the owner of expensive donkey guy, ein lo ela scharo, expecting payment. Expensive donkey guy says, thank you so much. Here's the whatever you worked for 2 hours. Here's the money for your labor. Shkoyach, that's it. However, if cheap donkey guy says to expensive donkey guy, here's the deal, I'm willing to let go of my cheap fashlepzach donkey in order to go ahead and save your Lexus Cadillac donkey, right? Then fine, and he agrees, and he says yes, then ultimately again, then expensive donkey guy is obligated to go ahead and compensate cheap donkey guy for the value of cheap donkey. Incredible. Says the Gemara, va'amai. But why is this? This is great. This is so fantastic. We'll have to stop with this, but this is fantastic. Listen to this. let's go back to case one, because it's much easier to say wine and honey versus cheap and expensive donkey. Now, listen to this. So when the barrel of honey breaks open, so essentially in that case the honey is lost. The honey is effectively hefker. It's hefker. So why don't we say that when the wine guy dumps out his wine and begins to go ahead and collect the honey, he's essentially collecting honey from hefker, and it really should be his. Milotime, did we not learn? So let's listen to this. If a person was going ahead and carrying barrels of wine or barrels of oil, and he saw that they were beginning to break, Lo yomer harei truma u'maisa perishesh b'sach. So I said, this is actually a great chap. This is a great chap. Right? Am Yisroel, I'm carrying my oil and my wine. And what happens? I see that they're about to break. So what happens? I should not say that, you know what, they're trumas and maestros on stuff that I have in my house. Because also by designating them as trumas and maestros, then what's the halacha? If they're lost, they're lost. It's not my problem. It's the Kohen or Levi's problem. That's a great chap. So you shouldn't do that. So the Gemara says, Ve'im amar lo amar klum. And by the way, if you did say it, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work, Rabbi was saying? Because the assumption is, since these barrels are about to break, that is considered to be like the produce inside the wine or the oil is lost, which means that it's what? It's hefker. It's hefker. So therefore it's not a valid designation, because hefker. So what do you see from here? You see from here that stuff that comes from broken barrels is considered to be ownerless. If that's the case, then halacha l'maisa, when the honey guy, right, when his barrel is breaking and wine guy comes to scoop it up, ultimately, wine guy should acquire it because it's hefker. Rabbi say, what's the case? The case is where, again, the barrel had some type of netting around it. So the netting, essentially, Rabbi say, even when the barrel was beginning to split, the netting would keep it together for a time. Enough time to be able to collect it in some other receptacle, and therefore it's not considered to be hefker. Rabosai, shkoyach. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up the answer with this tomorrow. Great Gemara. Shkoyach, everyone.